Hello everyone and welcome back. I am so sorry for the delay in getting this video out. After going through Act 1 again for patch 5 on my usual druid, I began to realize more and more that things weren't behaving normally for me. Certain things just would not trigger no matter what I did, and even the new thing where people would react to your animal shape just got stuck for me, and I had to go through the whole game with people being pretty rude to me wherever I went. Although it was kind of funny at first, I ended up having to put my druid off to the corner somewhere and use a companion to talk to people. But I was still determined to find new stuff and decided to start all over again as a tiefling warlock and switched from DirectX back to Vulcan. Now, I don't know what specifically caused the issue, but everything in this warlock session went a whole lot better with more and more things triggering and behaving correctly. Thus, I had decided to spend a few more days blowing through Act 1 again, seeing what I could find. And now without further delay, here is my discussion on everything we know so far about the mysterious artifact. First and foremost, the box itself is indeed of Githyanki origin, but whatever is inside of it probably isn't. I do have some thoughts for the contents of the box, but we'll get back to that later. More interestingly is the fact that, just like the Infernal script made canon in the Descent into Avernus campaign, the glyphs engraved into the artifact are also canon, first appearing in Dungeon Magazine issue number 100 as a Githyanki supplemental campaign in 2003. Sadly, the only known images of the Gith translation stone are heavily pixelated, so my previous attempt to translate it didn't go so well. Hopefully Larian or Witches of the Coast will acknowledge this and put out a up-to-date conversion chart for us to read Gith, similarly to what we have for reading Infernal. But the reason this is important is because we, as the players, actually have a chance to figure out what it says. But there's a catch. The game tells us it's actually an ancient dialect of Gith, which may be why Lysel hasn't been able to outright read it just yet. Now, here's the part that I find the most interesting out of everything. Whatever is inside of this artifact is very clearly sentient and powerful. It can actively choose who it wants to be bonded with, and if we ever try dropping it, it will hop back up into our hands and give us a small shock in response to what we just tried to do. I've discovered that if you leave Shadowheart and the artifact at camp when you cross the bridge and the scene plays out anyways, I'm certain that this was actually intentional by the devs and that the artifact will always come to us one way or another. The reason I believe this now is because as I kept playing, and of course had Shadowheart on the bridge with me, much later a quick scene plays out where the artifact suddenly appears in our inventory, and Shadowheart for some reason seems to be okay with it and even makes a comment when we try to examine it the next morning.
Suddenly, you feel an unfamiliar weight amongst your belongings. A curious, multi-sided artifact. Ancient-looking glyphs cover its dark metal exterior. You recall seeing Shadowheart with it before, but how do you now have it? No openings you can see, yet you sense something inside it.
Staring at it won't provide any more answers, unfortunately. And there's a power to it, that's for certain.
Now, I only got that scene to play out in the bugged Druid run, not the fixed Warlock run. So I don't truly know if that was supposed to be everything tied to us receiving the artifact. But it stands to reason that if this thing is sentient, trapped, and looking to stick with the strongest, safest person it can find, it makes sense that it would switch from Shadowheart to us. Now, just to back up here a bit, when I said powerful, I don't just mean a phylactery or something like that. I mean God-defying powerful. Maybe I just missed this the first time on my druid for patch 5, but my warlock. When I blew through Act 1 again, by the time I had gotten to the bridge, I had already maxed out my Lithid powers, and learned something rather interesting. When the Absolute starts talking to us and we fall to the ground, that's not just basic telepathy with a god. It is her authority being inflicted upon us. The same authoritative powers we usually use on other people is now being used on us, but this time it is infinitely more powerful. Now, why is this important? Because when the artifact flies up and expels the Absolute's voice, it's not just cutting off communication, it is completely protecting us from the authoritative willpower of a goddess. So the next logical question to ask would be this: what could possibly be strong enough to defy a goddess? Although this thing has power, it also clearly has limitations that we aren't quite aware of yet. It's still stuck inside of that artifact and is readily afraid and anxious about being discovered by both the Githyanki group and by the drow Minthara. When conversing with both parties, the same thing happens, and depending on how you do it, could play out in two different ways.
Her excitement is palatable. She lingers on thoughts of victory, of unbelievers' blood spilled, and of the weapon. She will seize it in the Absolute's name. You feel Shadowheart's anxiety. The weapon the Absolute seeks. It's the artifact that she carries. The same one that protected you as you entered the Goblin camp. Her mind focuses. The cultists cannot discover that the weapon they seek is within their grasp.
Basically, Shadowheart gets anxious about it being discovered and wants you to do everything in your power to help hide it. Turns out this is actually the occupant of the artifact influencing her. Shadowheart herself isn't the one actually anxious and afraid, but instead is receiving those feelings from the artifact.
You suddenly feel a strange anxiety take hold. Not your own, but that of the Gith artifact you carry. Somehow, it's afraid. You attune your mind to it. The artifact does not want to part from you. It does not want to fall into the Absolute's clutches.
But why is it afraid? And why are two different groups looking for it? Further adding to what we know about the artifact, Minthara and the Goblin group know it as a powerful weapon that belongs to the Absolute. Meanwhile, the Githyanki we meet claim it's actually a precious weapon stolen from Queen Blackith. But despite everything we know so far, the only thing the community actually wants to know about is this. What the heck is inside of this thing? I've seen a number of ideas that y'all have talked about, and I'm going to try to touch upon the possibility of each one and then talk about what I personally think is inside of it. One such deity that some of y'all might be hoping to see trapped inside of this artifact is none other than the god of murder, Baal. According to Larian, the Dead Three are supposedly responsible for everything going on right now, so it would make sense to see Baal return in some form or another. What you probably didn't know is that Baal has canonically been revived already, but is pretty much just a powerless wisp at this point. Long story short, the canon ending to Throne of Baal has our character choose mortality as Abdel Adrian, and then transitions to the Murder in Baldur's Gate campaign, where he goes off to live a long life working with the Flaming Fist, only to be killed off by a final long-lost Baal spawn. This is where Baal, unbeknownst to the public, is revived, meaning all of his former power should still be sealed away on Mount Celestia. I could potentially see some powerful being noticing this resurrection and sealing Baal in his severely weakened state into the artifact. On one hand, it would make sense for the Absolute and her group wanting this thing as a way to recover Baal and reunite him with Myrkul and Bane, while on the other hand, I could see Vlaakith viewing this trapped, powerless god as her ticket to ascension by stealing Baal's divine spark while he's helpless. And it's possible that the female voice of the Absolute is unfamiliar to him, which might be why this scene on the bridge happened, because he doesn't actually know who it is. Another idea some of y'all have been tossing around is the possibility of Gith making a return into the world. A very long time ago, Gith was the one who united her people against the Illithid Empire back when they were just a slave race, before they even had a name. After the Forerunners as a people won the rebellion against the Empire and split into the Githyanki and Githrizai, she became the very first leader of the Githyanki, the name meaning Children of Gith. With their own goals of conquest and the genocide of every mind flayer they could find, her advisor, the first Vlaakith, convinced her to go into Avernus and broker a deal with the evil dragon goddess Tiamat, and this was long before Zariel had taken over. Soon after the deal was made, Tiamat's red dragon consort Aphelamon visited the astral plane to inform Vlaakith of the pact, and reported that Gith would be remaining in Hell, choosing Vlaakith as her successor. Now, fast forward to today, where the 157th Vlaakith is a near mortal lich with ambitions of godhood. From what I could dig up, some of her people think that she has strayed from the path of Gith, which honestly, they're right. Canonically, she plans on changing literally everything if she ascends and gets her way. Now, this is where the possibility of Gith's return via the artifact becomes possible. Imagine, if you will, the consort has departed Avernus to speak to the first Vlaakith, and Gith is left alone with Tiamat. What do you think Tiamat did with her? Just for the sake of having an example, I foresee the possibility of Tiamat pulling out the artifact from her own hoard of treasures, an ancient artifact device with ancient Gith runes inscribed upon it, and sealing her away inside of it to be forever imprisoned. Now, forget making some ultimate sacrifice to be stuck in hell for the sake of your people, thinking you're gonna go fight in the Blood War for all of eternity. She can't even go out and fight for Tiamat and experience any joy from fighting and conquest. She is trapped, unable to die, fight, or do anything. When trying to imagine the cruelty of Tiamat, something along those lines is what I'm seeing. Meaning that the events of Zariel usurping Avernus from Tiamat gave someone a chance to rescue Gith after all this time. Because as it stands, Gith is the biggest threat to Vlaakith's rule. And after digging back into the Githyanki lore once again, I do think there is a good chance that she is trapped inside of the artifact. And although I think it's a bit of a stretch, her own psionic abilities originally used in defiance against the Lithid Empire could be the very thing we witnessed on the bridge protecting us from the Absolute. And lastly, my previous idea on what is inside of the artifact. Honestly, after redoing the research, I'm starting to lean more towards the Gith idea. So, without going too heavy back into it, I think the remnants of a dead god are inside of the artifact. When a god officially dies in D&D, their physical bodies pretty much float through space running on 1% power in a kind of permanent sleep. With this in mind, the Githyanki capital city was built upon one of these dead gods, someone who was already long dead before the Lithid Empire ever appeared. The current queen has been spending a long time trying to locate the divine spark within this corpse and use it for her own ascension to godhood. This is where I think the artifact came from. Vlaakith doesn't have 100% support from her people, especially those that don't agree with her ambitions. So I could potentially see someone in the capital discovering the divine spark, storing it in the artifact and stealing it away to prevent Vlaakith's ascension. For me, this used to make some sort of sense. But after redoing the research and discovering from Minthara that the weapon the Absolute seeks is also the same polyhedric artifact that the Githyanki are seeking, has made me lean away from the idea just a bit. And there you have it. To the best of my knowledge, that is everything we know so far on the artifact and my thoughts surrounding it. Let me know what you guys are thinking about everything so far. I'd love to see what the most popular theory actually is. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I usually check my comments every day and love chatting with everyone. So if you like this video, please give it the old thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you should definitely do that too. Until next time, stay safe out there.